The cold lights buzzed above the metal floor. Rinna sat in the corner of the cage. Her thin tail wrapped tightly around her legs. She didn't move. She didn't cry. Crying never helped anyone down here. She was small for a feline girl. Her fur patchy from lack of food. Her ears drooped from weakness. Her sharp eyes still glowed faintly in the dark, but the fire in them was fading fast. Once, she was told she would serve the great future of her species, that her body would be used to bring strong new blood. But when the scanners looked at her DNA and saw defective genes, she was rejected. They didn't explain. They didn't care. They simply stamped her as unfit for breeding and threw her down into the lower tunnel. She had been 12 standard days without sunlight. Her water was dirty. Her food just dry pellets dumped once a day through a pipe. Sometimes she heard others crying in the cages around her. Sometimes she didn't hear anything at all. That was worse. The guards called this place the pit. A place where the rejected were stored until someone decided what to do with them. Some were used for experiments. Some were sold in secret auctions. Most were forgotten. She knew her turn would come soon, but that night, something changed. The lights above her flickered. The floor rumbled slightly. Something in the tunnels above had broken. Then, footsteps, heavy, slow. Human footsteps, not like the guards. This one moved carefully, pausing often, muttering to himself. He didn't sound angry. He sounded confused, maybe even tired. Rinna pressed herself into the corner, her claws ready, even though her body shook with weakness. She expected a stun rod, or a laugh, or worse. But then, a soft white light appeared. It moved closer, a torch. And behind it a man's face. He was human, young, with tired eyes and grease on his clothes. He looked down at the cage, his brow furrowed. "What the hell?" he whispered, his voice soft, not cruel. Rinna didn't speak. She just stared at him, frozen. His eyes locked with hers. Then he did something strange. He knelt. Right there on the dirty floor. He lowered himself to her level and looked her in the eye. Are you real?" he asked, confused. Rinna didn't answer. She didn't know what he wanted. He looked at the cage lock. "Why are you in here?" he said to himself, more than to her. Then he pulled out a small tool from his belt and slowly opened the small panel next to the lock. A few sparks flew. The light above them blinked. Rinna held her breath. But he didn't open the door. He didn't free her. Not yet. Instead, he sighed and said, "I need to come back. This ain't right." He stood and walked back into the dark tunnel. Rinna heard his steps fade into silence for a moment. She thought maybe he was just another dream, another lie. But the next day, he returned. He came with water, clean water, in a silver bottle. He passed it through the feeding hole without a word. Then some soft bread wrapped in a napkin. Rinna stared at it like it was treasure. She didn't say thank you. She didn't trust him yet. But her hands trembled as she ate, and her eyes stayed on him the whole time. He sat outside her cage for a long time, saying nothing, only watching her. And when she finally whispered, "Why?" he looked surprised. Then he smiled. A tired but kind smile. "No one should be left like this," he said softly. "My name's Callan. I'm just a mechanic." Rinna lowered her head. She didn't believe in kindness anymore, but something in his voice felt different when he left again. She thought maybe that was it. But the next night, he returned again with a blanket folded tight in his bag. He slid it through the hole and whispered, "Hide it if they see it. You're done." She touched the soft fabric with shaking fingers. Her fur had never felt anything so warm in weeks. That night, for the first time in days, Rinna slept without shaking, and in her dreams, she saw the human's face again, not as a monster, not as a buyer, but as a flicker of light. She didn't know why he came. She didn't know what he wanted, but for the first time since she was thrown away like trash. Someone looked at her like she mattered, and that was the beginning of everything. Asterisk, the next time Callan returned to the tunnels, his steps were faster. He looked both ways before entering the broken shaft that led to the pit. He wasn't just curious anymore. He was worried. Rinna hadn't left his thoughts since he first saw her, those glowing feline eyes wide, sharp, and scared haunted him like a dream that wouldn't fade. She didn't speak much, but her silence screamed louder than any voice. Tonight, he brought more, not just food or water, but a data tag hidden in an empty tools case. It was a tracker blocker, something illegal to use near facility subjects. He didn't care. He wasn't going to let her be marked like an animal. When he reached her cage, she was already standing. Weak, yes, but standing. Her eyes were brighter today, like they had a question stuck inside them. Callan knelt again, smiling gently. "I brought something," he whispered. Rinna tilted her head, her ears twitching with curiosity. He slid the blocker through the hatch. "Put it under your fur," he said. "They won't be able to scan you." She took it with thin fingers and looked at him carefully. "You come back," she whispered, her voice dry. He blinked. Surprised, she spoke again. "Of course," he said. "I couldn't stop thinking about you." Her eyes widened, not in fear, but something softer, confusion, maybe even hope. She looked at the food in his hand, but didn't take it. Instead, she looked at him and asked, "Why help me?" Callan sat down fully, back against the cold tunnel wall. "Because I hate what they're doing here," he said slowly. "I came here to fix machines, not watch people get thrown away." She lowered her eyes, holding the blocker tight. "I'm not people," she said. "I was born wrong." Callan leaned closer. "Says who?" "The scanners," she replied. "The elders, the guards." She looked at her hands. Her claws chipped and shaking. "They said I'm weak. Small, not useful." He shook his head. "You're not weak, Rinna," he said firmly. "You survived this cage, alone. For how long?" She didn't answer, but her silence told the story. He handed her the soft bread again, and this time, she took it slowly. She bit into it, and tears filled her eyes, not from hunger, but from memory. "No one's ever fed me like this," she whispered. "Not since my mother." Callan's chest tightened. He wanted to say more, but words felt too heavy instead. He placed something on the floor near her cage's small light orb. It gave off a warm glow. "Not harsh, like the prison lights, a gift," he said. "If it makes you feel better at night." Rinna watched the glow with wonder. Then slowly, carefully, she reached her hand through the small hatch and touched his wrist. Just once, gently, then pulled back quickly. Afraid she'd done something wrong, Callan didn't flinch. He smiled. That one touch meant more than any word. It was trust, tiny, fragile but growing. Suddenly, a sound echoed down the tunnel, metal boots on steel. Callan's eyes widened. "Hide everything," he whispered fast. Rinna shoved the food and blocker under her bedding, and Callan grabbed his tool bag. He stood up just as a guard's flashlight lit the tunnel. "You're not supposed to be down here," the guard barked. Callan shrugged, pretending to be annoyed. "Power fault," he said, pointing at the ceiling panel. "Wiring's burnt." "Got reports of flickering." The guard grunted. "Hurry it up," he said. "This level's restricted, for good reason." Callan nodded and pretended to work on the wires until the footsteps faded again. Then he looked back at Rinna. She was holding her breath. "I'll come back tomorrow," he whispered. But before he could leave, she whispered, "Don't leave me." Those 3 words hit harder than anything else he had heard in years. He turned slowly, seeing the fear on her face. Not just fear of the cage, fear of being alone again. "I won't," he promised. "I swear." He gently tapped the cage wall and said, "You're not trash. Rinna, you're someone." As he disappeared back into the tunnel, She curled around the small light orb. Its glow warmed her fingers. Her heart still hurt, still feared. But something deep inside had changed, because tonight someone chose to stay. And her eyes would remember that forever. The alarm didn't start with sound, it started with heat. Callan had just entered the tunnel when the metal walls shook slightly. Then, faint hissing noises echoed above, followed by red flickering lights. A cooling unit in the colony's center grid had failed again. But this time, it wasn't a small error. This time, it was a system surge. And Firepipe's old emergency exhaust tunnels were already preparing to open. Which meant one thing. The underground zones were about to become ovens. Callan dropped his tool bag and ran. Not for safety, not for orders. He ran to Rinna. She was awake, crouched low. Already sensing the danger in the air, the lights above her blinked faster now. Red and angry, he skidded to the cage, pulled out his blade, and whispered, "We don't have time." He slashed open the small control box. Sparks flying into his jacket. The cage door clicked. But wouldn't open. Come on, he muttered. Fingers trembling. Behind him, the wall panel's grand hot air was building in the fire pipes. Rinna crawled closer, gripping the bars. Her eyes showed fear. Yes, but also trust. She wasn't begging this time. She was ready. With one final kick, Callan broke the latch. The door creaked open just as a blast of heat shot through the vents above. "Move," he said. Grabbing her wrist, they ran. Down the rusted maintenance tunnel, through low pipes that hissed with warning steam. Rinna coughed, her lungs already burning. But she didn't stop. She couldn't, behind them. The lower cages burst from heat pressure. Metal folding inward like paper. "Keep your head low," Callan shouted, dragging her toward the old firepipe system. It hadn't been used in years, but he knew the map. He'd studied the blueprints for fun, not knowing one day he'd use them to escape. He shoved open a side hatch, and they dropped into the curved steel pipe. It was narrow, hot, and smelled like old oil and rust. Rinna crawled behind him, gasping for air. Her foot slipped, and she nearly fell backward, but Callan caught her arm. Holding her tight, "Don't let go," she whispered. "Never," he said, not even hesitating. They crawled through the heat-blasted tunnel. Callan pushing open vent after vent. Rinna's skin was blistered in some spots. Her fur wet with sweat, her breath came in weak gasps. But every time she slowed, Callan turned back and said, "Almost there." And she believed him suddenly. A metal door appeared at the end of the pipe. It was locked from the outside. But Callan pulled out a tool, his last power charge. He jammed it into the lock, and it sparked blue. The door slid open just wide enough for them to squeeze through. They tumbled out into an abandoned service corridor, dark and full of dust. But it was cool. The heat hadn't reached this far yet. They were safe for now. Rinna collapsed against the wall, gasping. Her hands shaking from exhaustion, Callan tore open a water pack and helped her drink. "You did it," he whispered, brushing soot from her face. "You made it out." She looked at him with wide, tired eyes. "I couldn't have without you," she whispered. He sat beside her, both of them breathing hard. "We're not free yet," he said, "but we're not in that cage anymore." A quiet silence fell between them. The kind of silence where two people know their lives just changed forever. Rinna looked around, noticing the cracked walls and broken floor tiles. "Where are we?" "Old power station," Callan replied. "No one comes here now." He stood, walked over to a hidden corner, and pulled away a metal sheet, behind it a hidden box. He opened it and pulled out a small med kit. A dusty coat and a collar removal tool. Rinna's eyes locked on it. "My collar," she whispered. He nodded. "Let's get it off." She sat still as he worked, careful not to hurt her when the final click sounded. The collar dropped from her neck and hit the ground with a dull thud. Rinna touched her bare neck in disbelief. "I've worn that since I was 6, she whispered. Callan picked it up, stared at it, then threw it into the darkness. "You're not a number anymore," he said. "You're you." Rinna looked at him, tears in her eyes, not from fear this time, but from something stronger, something she hadn't felt in years. Hope. The news spread faster than fire by the next morning. Every security screen in the lower colony blinked with the same alert. Human technician #042-CALEN-wanted for genetic containment breach. And below that, a single blurry image. Callan's face, sweaty, panicked, caught on a tunnel camera just before he helped Rinna escape. He saw the notice on a broken display screen near an old food station. His chest tightened. He looked down the alley where Rinna waited. Hidden under the oversized coat he gave her, she didn't speak. She didn't need to. She had seen her own face on the screen too, below his alert. Another line. Feline class rejected specimen, genetically unstable. Do not approach. Callan felt sick. They hadn't just marked him as a criminal. They'd marked her as less than a person. Again, we need to move, he whispered. She nodded, silent but sharp, her eyes scanning every shadow since the collar came off. Something had changed in her. She wasn't just surviving anymore. She was thinking, watching, choosing. They left the station quietly, sticking to forgotten paths, dead zones, and construction ruins where scanners didn't work well. Rinna stayed close behind him. Her steps light, her body weak but steady. But every time a noise echoed, metal creaking, pipes groaning, she froze, not from fear of being caught, but from fear of being taken back. Callan noticed he didn't rush her. Instead, he whispered small things to distract her. Stories about the surface, about stars, about wind and trees. She had never felt wind before. She didn't even know what a tree looked like outside pictures. When she asked, "Do they move?" he smiled and said, "Only when the wind tells them to." She liked that. For a few seconds, she smiled too. But that peace didn't last that night. While they hid inside a collapsed water processing unit, a noise snapped them awake. Boots, multiple pairs, heavy ones. Callan peeked through a crack in the metal wall. 3 guards, armored and armed, not random patrol. These were trackers. Elite hunters sent when someone high up wanted a fugitive caught fast. Rinna's hands clenched around a pipe, her claws digging into the rust. Her ears twitched, her tail stiffened. "I can run," she whispered. "If I run, they'll stop chasing you." Callan turned to her. "No," he said. "You're not bait. You're not a distraction. You're with me." She stared at him for a second, then said, "If we die, I'm glad I met you first." He didn't answer. He just grabbed her hand and pulled her deeper into the tunnels. The next 20 minutes were a blur. Running, sliding, ducking, steam vents hissed around them, and old alarms blinked red above sealed doors. Rinna slipped once, hitting her knee hard, but didn't cry, didn't scream. She just got back up. Callan kept moving, dragging open doors and pulling down crates behind them to block the path. But the trackers were fast. They had thermal sensors. And Callan had no more blockers. Finally, they reached a tight shaft that led up into the old mining lifts. "Climb," he said. Rinna looked up at the rusted ladder. It stretched high, nearly 2 levels above. Her arms were tired, but she nodded. "I can do it." She started climbing. One rung at a time, Callan followed behind, glancing back every few seconds. Then he saw it, a laser flash in the dark. They'd found them. "Keep going." He shouted. Shots hit the bottom of the shaft. Sparks flying, metal screeched. But Rinna climbed faster, teeth clenched, body shaking. Callan reached the top seconds after her, pulling a broken pipe across the shaft to block it. Then he slammed the emergency seal. The door locked with a hiss. They were safe for now. They collapsed inside an old mining control room. The air was stale, but cool. The walls covered in dust and old signs written in 3 alien languages. Rinna sat down slowly, her knee bleeding, her body trembling. Callan knelt beside her, wiping her face gently. "You did it," he said softly. She shook her head. "No," she whispered. "We did." She leaned against him, exhausted. His arm wrapped around her shoulders. She didn't flinch this time. She let herself rest there, in the warmth of someone who chose her not for bloodline, not for genetics, but because he saw her outside. The trackers searched the wrong tunnel, and deep below the stars in a forgotten room. 2 fugitives, 1 human, 1 feline, breathed together in silence. Not as property, not as prey, but as people. The next day, silence returned. No sirens, no boots, no scanners. But silence didn't mean safety. Callan kept the door bolted, checking it every hour. Rinna sat by the cracked control panel, her leg bandaged, her eyes scanning the old maps. Dust danced in the weak light above. The room smelled like oil and rust, but it was theirs for now. They shared a small meal-dry rations Callan had hidden in his belt. Rinna didn't complain. She never did. She just chewed quietly, watching Callan like she still couldn't believe he was real. "Why are you risking this?" she asked again, voice soft. Callan wiped his hands and looked at her. "Because no one should be thrown away," he replied. "Not you, not anyone." Rinna looked down. Her claws slowly tapped the metal floor. "Even if I was made wrong," she whispered. Callan leaned forward. "You were made different," he said. "That's not the same." She opened her mouth to respond, but then froze. Her ears twitched sharply. Someone was coming. Callan turned off the light, motioned her behind a crate. He grabbed a tool from the floor, just a wrench, but heavy enough to fight. Footsteps echoed closer. 1 pair, slow, heavy. Then the door creaked. It didn't slam open. It opened gently, carefully, and in walked a soldier, but not like the trackers. This one wore older armor, painted with a faded unit symbol, a claw wrapped in stars. His helmet was off, clipped to his belt. He looked young. Tired and unsure, he stepped into the room and stopped. His eyes landed directly on Callan, and then on Rinna. Callan moved in front of her, ready to defend. The soldier raised one hand, slowly. "Wait," he said, voice calm. "I'm not here to hurt you." Callan narrowed his eyes. "Then why are you here?" "I saw your names on the terminal logs," the soldier replied. "I was ordered to report any sightings, but I didn't." Rinna peeked from behind the crate. The soldier saw her clearly now, her torn coat, her bruised legs, the thin line around her neck where the collar had once been. His face changed, from duty to doubt, to guilt. "I used to guard the breeding centers," he said quietly. "I saw what they did to the rejected ones. I didn't speak up." Rinna's eyes narrowed. "You watched them throw us away," she said. "I did," the soldier admitted. "And I hated myself for it." Callan didn't lower the wrench, but his grip loosened. "What do you want now?" he asked. The soldier stepped closer and knelt slowly. From his coat, he pulled out a small key card. "It's for the outer gate of the decommissioned flight dock," he said. "There's a ship still there rolled. But it works. You'll need this to open the launch locks." Rinna didn't move. She stared at him like she was looking through his soul. "Why help us?" she whispered. "He met her gaze. "Because I once stood and did nothing," he said. "And now I want to do something that matters." He placed the keycard on the ground and backed away. "You'll have a 12-minute window after you open the gate," he warned. "Security will ping it, but the system delay will give you time." Callan glanced at Rinna, then at the card. It felt like a trap, but the soldier's eyes looked honest. "Why are you risking this?" Callan asked him. The The soldier smiled bitterly. "Because I saw a little girl thrown into a cage once," he said. "She looked just like her, and I never forgot." He turned and walked away, leaving the door half open behind him. For a long time, neither of them spoke. The keycard sat between them, glowing faintly blue. Rinna finally broke the silence. "You believe him?" Callan looked at the card. "I believe he's tired of being a coward," he said. "And that's enough." She nodded, slowly, then said, "If we leave." "What do we do next?" He looked at her. "We live," he said simply. "We breathe, we walk in the sun, and you choose what happens to you." She stared at him. "Not owned," she said. "Not used." He nodded. "Just you." "Rinna." She picked up the keycard, her hands still trembling. But there was fire in her eyes again. Not fear, but something stronger, will. And somewhere deep in the shadows of the colony, a door had opened, not just in steel, but in fate. The flight dock was dead, silent, cold, forgotten like everything else outside the city core. Callan and Rinna stood in the shadows of the lower cliff path. Ahead of them was the decommissioned launch zone, its gates rusty, its walls scorched from old battles. No guards, no lights, just wind, dust, and time. Rinna gripped the keycard tightly, her claws digging into its edge. She was shaking not from fear of being caught, but because this was the first time in her life. She had a real choice, and choices were heavier than chains. "Are you sure?" Callan asked quietly. She nodded, eyes locked forward. "I've never been sure of anything in my life," she whispered. "But I'm sure now." He pulled a metal latch on the side gate. The door groaned open with a creak like a dying animal. Inside, everything was covered in dust, old crates, fallen cables, and an ancient launch console blinking weakly, but at the center stood a small spacecraft, round body, scratched hull. Broken antenna, but its landing struts were solid. Its name still half visible on the side, Sky Whisper. Rinna touched the ship's side with quiet wonder. "It's real," she breathed. "Not a cage," Callan added. She turned to him, her voice trembling. "Do you know how many times I dreamed of touching the stars?" He smiled softly. "Now you'll fly through them." They climbed aboard through the back ramp. Inside was tight but clean. 2 chairs, 1 console, no weapons. Callan immediately went to the power bay, plugging in the backup cell he carried for weeks. Rinna watched the lights flicker on one by one. Like stars waking from sleep, she sat in the pilot seat. Not because she knew how to fly, but because she wanted to feel it. Callan sat beside her and handed her a small switch, ready to unlock the gate. She hesitated, her thumb hovering. "This changes everything," she said. He looked at her gently. It already did. She pressed the switch. A soft hum echoed through the floor, outside. Old magnetic locks snapped open with sparks and steam. The launch bay rumbled, but the stars were waiting. Suddenly, a red warning blinked on the screen. "Inbound patrol. ETA 11 minutes. They both froze. The soldier was right. The window was short. Callan moved quickly, checking thrusters. Loading coordinates, powers running. "But we need to clear the outer wall before we can boost." Rinna grabbed the control bar. "Tell me what to do." He showed her how to hold it. How to tilt, how to shift weight. She listened like she had done it all her life. Because this wasn't escape anymore. It was flight. Outside, the sky had turned orange. A storm was rolling in perfect cover or perfect death. Depending on luck, Rinna stared at the open gate and whispered, "I don't want to run anymore." Callan looked at her. "Then what do you want to do?" She gripped the controls tighter. "I want to rise." He gave her a look, half surprised, half proud. "Then hold on." The engine coughed, roared, and came alive. The ship shook as it lifted slowly from the ground below them. Dust spiraled like a ghost trying to hold them down. But the ship didn't stop. Then the side gate burst open. 2 patrol vehicles screeched to a halt. Guards jumped out, weapons drawn. Callan saw one raise a plasma rifle, but before he could shoot, someone stepped in front of him. The soldier, helmet off, hands raised. He shouted something loud, angry, but unheard over the rising engines. The guard lowered his weapon, confused, and in that pause, the ship shot forward. Rinna's hands stayed steady on the controls. Her breath sharp, her heart louder than the thrusters. They cleared the outer wall. The storm swallowed them. Rain slammed against the ship. Lightning cracked through the sky, but the stars were just beyond the clouds. Callan reached across and tapped the autopilot key. Final jump drive charged. He said, "You ready?" Rinna looked at him, her fur soaked, her body bruised, but her eyes were fire. She nodded, and for the first time in her life, she gave the command, "Jump," in a flash of light. The ship vanished into the stars, not as a transport, not as cargo, but as something new, a beginning. The stars stretched like silver threads around the ship. Rinna sat quietly in the pilot's seat, her hand resting on the control lever. She didn't speak. She didn't need to. Because silence had never felt so free, the ship floated between systems now, hidden in the deep dark space where scanners couldn't reach. The storm was behind them. The planet that rejected her was gone. Just a speck behind a trail of dust and light, Callan walked in from the rear cabin. Wiping grease from his hands, "Main systems stable," he said. "No trackers on our tail." Rinna gave a small nod. She was watching the stars. Her eyes were soft, no longer full of fear. "I never thought I'd see this," she whispered. "Real space." "Real stars?" Callan sat beside her, glancing at her bandaged knee. "Still hurts." "A little," she said, "but not like before." He smiled. For days, they had drifted like ghosts, hiding in dead zones, resting only when it was safe. But this moment, this quiet felt like something earned, not stolen, not borrowed. Theirs. Rinna touched her own neck. No collar, no number, just skin. "I used to dream I could choose who I was," she said, "but every time I tried, someone told me no." Callan leaned back, arms crossed. "Well, no one's here to stop you now." She looked at him, her eyes glowing faintly. "Then I choose," she said softly. "I choose to live." He didn't say anything. He just nodded, a quiet smile on his lips. Later that day, the ship approached a small human research vessel drifting in the outer ring of a trade-free zone. Old, peaceful, mostly medical and supply crews. Callan sent a signal requesting emergency docking non-combatant passenger in need of care. A calm voice responded. Docking approved. Come in slowly. The docking clamps hissed and clicked as their small ship connected. The airlock opened with a rush of clean air. And standing there were 2 surprised Med officers, 1 human, 1 alien. Rinna stepped out slowly. Her coat still torn, her fur still dirty. But she held her head high, not like cargo, not like a slave, but like someone who had survived everything. The alien nurse gasped, seeing her thin body, the bruises, the healing burns, but Rinna didn't flinch. She walked straight ahead and said, "I'm not a number. My name is Rinna." The nurse covered her mouth, tears forming in her eyes. Callan stepped behind her, nodding. "She's free," he said. "She's not going back." The officers led them inside, gave them warm food, blankets, and water. Rinna didn't eat much. Her body was still adjusting, but she smiled after every bite. She smiled even more when a little alien girl passed by and waved at her. She waved back, for the first time. Someone saw her and didn't look away. That night, she sat with Callan in the quiet corner of the medical bay, her legs tucked under her, her hands holding a soft, pillow-like treasure. "I used to think no one would ever want me," she said. "Not even for the cruel things. I was too small, Too broken, too nothing. Callan looked at her. But you're not nothing, he said. You're more than they ever saw. You always were. She turned to him, her voice low. Why did you come back? He thought for a long time, then said, because when I looked at you in that cage, something broke inside me. I couldn't walk away. Rinna, I couldn't pretend you didn't matter. Tears welled in her eyes. But she didn't cry. She leaned forward, resting her head on his shoulder, and whispered, You're the first person who didn't look at me like I was property. He placed his hand gently on hers. Because you never were, weeks passed. The station gave them space to rest. Rinna started walking stronger, eating more, laughing softly when someone told a joke in the hall. She read maps, learned words, asked questions about ships, languages, stars. She wasn't just alive. She was becoming, and one day when the officer asked Callan, Is she your rescued specimen? Rinna stepped forward and answered, No, she said clearly. I belong to no one. But she turned and looked at Callan, her voice soft. I choose to stay with him. The officer smiled. Then we'll mark her as free citizen, he said, with full name and choice. And just like that, the girl who had been thrown away, the girl who was branded unfit, became someone, not a thing, not a slave, not a project, but a voice, a life, a choice.